did you? Anything you want.
Thank God this is happening. Russia says time has come to ditch the dollar. With the U.S. unveiling a new set of sanctions against Russia on Friday, Moscow said it would definitely respond to Washington's latest sanctions and, in particular, it is accelerating efforts to abandon the American currency in trade transactions, said Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov. The time has come when we need to go from words to actions, and get rid of the dollar as a means of mutual settlements, and look for other alternatives, he said in an interview with International Affairs magazine, quoted by RT. Thank God, this is happening, and we will speed up this work, Ryabkov said, explaining the move would come in addition to other retaliatory measures as a response to a growing list of U.S. sanctions. Previously, Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak said that a growing number of countries are interested in replacing the dollar as a medium in global oil trades and other transactions. There is a common understanding that we need to move towards the use of national currencies in our settlements. There is a need for this, as well as the wish of the parties, Novak said. According to the minister, it concerns both Turkey and Iran, with more countries likely to join the growing de-dollarization wave. We are considering an option of payment in national currencies with them. This requires certain adjustments in the financial, economic, and banking sectors to accomplish. Last week, we reported that the Kremlin was interested in trading with Ankara using the Russian ruble and the Turkish lira. India has also vowed to pay for Iranian oil in rupees. Meanwhile, the world's second-largest economy and Washington's trade war nemesis, China, has been taking steps to challenge the greenback's dominance with the launch of an oil futures contract backed by Chinese currency, the petro-yuan. China and Iran have already agreed to stop using the dollar in global trade as China has ramped up purchases of Iranian oil in defiance of U.S. sanctions. America's long-term challenge, the destruction of the U.S. dollar. What's incredible about this constant, steady destruction of the currency is how subtle it is. Few people notice, because modern-day central bankers. On April 2, 1792, George Washington signed into law what's commonly referred to as the Mint and Coinage Act. It was one of the first major pieces of legislation in the young country's history. And it was an important one, because it formally created the United States dollar. Under the act, the U.S. dollar was defined as a particular amount of copper, silver, or gold. It wasn't just a piece of paper. A $10 Eagle coin, for example, was 16.04 grams of pure gold, whereas a 1-cent coin was 17.1 grams of copper. The ratios between gold, silver, and copper were all fixed back then. But if we apply today's gold price of $1,292 per troy ounce, we can see that the current value of the original dollar as defined by the Mint and Coinage Act of 1792 is roughly $66.75. In other words, the dollar has lost 98.5% of its value since 1792. What's incredible about this constant, steady destruction of the currency is how subtle it is. Few people seem to notice, because modern-day central bankers try to manage inflation between 2% to 3% per year. 2% to 3% per year is pretty trivial. But it happens again the next year. And the year after that. And the year after that. After a decade or so, it really starts to add up. But there's an important, other side of the equation, income. Costs are clearly rising. And it's fair to say that incomes have been rising too. But which one has risen more? In 1982, back when I was a toddler, the price of a Ford Mustang was $6,572. Today the cheapest Mustang starts at $25,680 according to Ford's website. So a Mustang today is around 4x as expensive as it was 36 years ago. U.S. Labor Department data from 1982 shows that average earnings were $309 per week, or $16,086 per year. That was enough to buy 2.45 Mustangs. Today's earnings are $881 per week, or $45,812 per year. That's only enough to buy 1.78 Mustangs. So when denominated in Ford Mustangs, people's incomes have fallen 27.3% since 1982. More recently than that, say, back in 2005, an entry-level Mustang cost $19,215 at a time when average wages were $40,664 per year or 2.12 Mustangs per year. So even since 2005, average income levels have fallen 16%. Obviously this trend doesn't just apply to Ford Mustangs. If we look at housing in the United States, we can see that the median home price in 2003 was $186,000, according to Federal Reserve data, at a time when the Labor Department reported average weekly wages of $620. So that was roughly 0.173 houses per person per year. Today the median home price is $328,000, with average wages of $881. Or 0.139 houses per person per year. That's a decline in income of 19.6% over the last 15 years. Again, it's a slow, subtle destruction. But over time, inflation really adds up. Over the long term, the average person becomes poorer. We can view this trend anecdotally as well. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, it was common for a man to go out into the workforce and support his entire family. On a single salary, the average American family could afford a home, a car, modern technology at the time, savings, and even a summer vacation. Today it's normal for both spouses in a family to have full-time jobs, just to make ends meet. Data from Pew Research shows that 70% of American households, married couples with children, back in 1960 were single income, that is only the father worked. Today, 60% of households have both spouses working. And given the other statistics we routinely see about how the average U.S. household has very little savings and is loaded down with debt, they're barely making it even with two incomes. That's because inflation has slowly robbed people's livelihoods. What's truly bizarre is that this exact same inflation is actually official policy. Both central bankers and politicians deliberately try to engineer inflation, and they formally disclose this to the public. The Fed announces its inflation targets, and economists panic if inflation is too low. Or even worse, if there's deflation and prices fall. The government actually has a vested interest in inflation. They like rising prices because the national debt is so obscenely large. The idea is that, if the government borrows $10 billion today on a 30-year term, they want the value of that $10 billion to be as little as possible 3 decades from now. So a slow, steady destruction of the currency is actually to their benefit. The government wants to be able to inflate the debt away. But as consumers, we prefer falling, or at least stable, prices. Price stability ensures that people's purchasing power remains the same. Rising prices are destructive, rewarding those who go into debt, like the government, at the expense of anyone who has been responsibly saving. Think about it: if you put $100 in a savings account 10 years ago, you wouldn't be able to buy as much with it today as you could have back then. Saving money actually costs you purchasing power. The month-to-month and year-to-year variations on inflation will be all over the board. But the long-term trend is pretty clear: prices continue to rise. And it's fair to say that no nation or empire in history has ever been able to prosper by slowly destroying the value of its currency and its middle class. Which countries are dumping the dollar and why? The European Union is considering switching payments from the US dollar to the euro after Washington threatened to target European firms working in Iran, according to reports. The measure may help the EU to retain one of the world's largest markets, which was opened for trade after the historic nuclear deal signed by Tehran and the P5+1 powers, China, France, Russia, UK, US, plus Germany, in June 2015. The idea to eliminate the role of the greenback in international settlements is not new. Aside from the EU, a number of nations have been mulling the idea. RT discussed with analysts how realistic the prospect of countries ditching the dollar is. In light of the recent developments, Iran is the most pressured nation to drop the dollar, with Tehran having partially adjusted trade without the U.S. currency, Alexander Kteb, president of Competent Finance SAS, told RT. When Iran was previously under sanctions from 2012 to 2015, it established new mechanisms to bypass U.S.-related financial institutions, such as barter exchange, and to replace the dollar with other currencies, such as the renminbi in its bilateral trade with China or the euro in its trade with European countries, The Economist said. At the same time, China's recent move to trade oil in yuan is seen as an initial step to challenging the dollar dominance. Stephen Innes, head of FX trading for Oanda in Asia Pacific, told RT, stressing that the number of bilateral trade agreements, signed amongst Asia Pacific nations, will settle in yuan. Mainland it is laying the ground for the Belt and Road Initiative, and China is even sweetening the pot by offering swap facilities to local countries to promote the use of the yuan, he added. Experts are unanimous on the point that bi- and multilateral pacts between various nations could become the major drivers on the way toward decreasing the dependence on U.S. currency in international trade. This would depend on the leverage the EU, the UK, Russia and China deploy. The likely scenario is diversification, bilateral arrangements between trading partners, or regional arrangements, substituting for multilateral arrangements that supported dollar dominance. Rama Vasudevan, an associate professor at the Department of Economics, Colorado State University, told RT. At the same time, analysts admit that getting rid of the greenback is not an easy task. It took the US dollar nearly a century to unsettle the British pound that had been enjoying its preeminence through the 19th century and the first half of the 20th as the global reserve currency. Old habits are hard to break, as most of the global hedging is still done on U.S. exchanges like NYMEX or ICE, Innes said. The issues are working out the deliverable to hedge ratio factors, which could put many off from breaking long-held settlement in U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is still, for many reasons, the international trade and reserve currency of choice, according to Kteb. The whole international financial system is currently structured around the United States and around the central role of the dollar. However, the expert noted that the international system will change dramatically. Rapid development of blockchain technology along with routing of virtual currencies is reportedly set to bring about the changing process. Eventually, the evolution of global finance will be very much related to the evolution of the global balance of power, The Economist told RT. This will not happen overnight. It will take time and many more crises and balance shifts. None really knows what the new system will look like. The experts agreed that expelling the greenback from its dominant position in the international monetary system will take much more effort than just replacing it with the euro or other domestic currencies. Dollar dominance does not depend simply on its use to denominate trade, but on the dollar's role as the pivot of the international financial system, the fact that about 88% of the average daily turnover of foreign exchange instruments is against the dollar, in contrast to the share of the euro which is only about 31%, said Vasudevan. The researcher highlighted that the recent impulse for dislodging the U.S. currency is a symptom of a wider discontent with the rules of the dollar system, but is not a cure for the dollar problem.